The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. We're over 80 episodes in now, and we're learning new things. Today I'm joined by Patrick Hansen. He's a survivor from California. Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking a little bit before we started. Your case is a very interesting one, but before we get into your story, let's talk about, who's Patrick Hansen?
Yeah, sure. And again, thanks for having me on. I am living in Northern California, born and raised out here, 53 years old, and have a great family. My wife's in real estate. I work in the construction industry as a vice president of sales for the Western region for our company. And I have three children, twins that are boy girls. They go to school in Colorado. They're seniors in college. They go to different colleges, but they're getting ready to graduate. And then I have a daughter in high school who's a senior, and so she's getting ready to graduate. So just dad stuff and busy couple months ahead of me.
Yeah, sounds like a successful life despite cancer. So you were diagnosed with a paratesticular liposarcoma, which is a first for us on this podcast. What led you up to this diagnosis?
So it's kind of a long path to the actual diagnosis, but in 2020, that was COVID years, the beginning of COVID, but we were up in Lake Tahoe on vacation, and maybe a week or two before that, I just had felt something odd on my left testicle. It felt a little painful, almost like a deep groin pull. And so when I was checking it out down there, I felt a bump, and thought, okay, that's weird, because the other side didn't feel that way. So this was just on my mind. It was on my mind, and we were on vacation. I remember sitting at the beach and just talking to my wife, and she's like, why don't you make an appointment? So I walked away to where I could make a phone call from vacation and called a urologist back at home and said, hey, this is what's going on. I'm a little concerned. Can I get in for an appointment? Which I was able to get in the next week. And that was great. Met with the doctor, and he checked me out, and he said, yeah, I definitely feel something. But I think he said, could be an infection of your epididymis. He said, those happen. So I'm going to give you some antibiotics and want you to take ibuprofen 3 times a day, that whole thing, and then come back in 2 weeks. But he did, at that time, order me an ultrasound. So I got the ultrasound. Things came back fairly normal. There was a cyst that was noted on the left epididymis. And he said, oh, those are quite common. And, he said, yeah, I've been thinking about this. And he checked everything out again. He said, I think you have what might be called a spermatocele, which is a buildup of fluid in that area, which, again, it's not super common, but it's not uncommon. Okay, he said, if this bothers you, just check back in 6 months. And time went on, and it would bother me off and on at that point. There'd be days or a week where I'd really notice it, and then I'd be fine. And, I kept noticing, hey, it just doesn't feel right. So I went to a different urologist about 6 to 8 months later, and he checked it out. And, he said, hey, the good thing is it's not testicular cancer. It's probably a spermatocele, or there's another thing called a hydrocele, which he referred to. And again, he just said, I'm not concerned at all. Let's monitor it, and we'll keep going. So that was in 2021. And we fast forward a little bit to 2022 in the spring, and it was notably quite larger. When I would feel my left side, it felt it was about the size of a lime. So quite large. I went back to that same urologist, and then at that time he ordered an ultrasound, but he wasn't overly concerned. And dismissed it as he said, it's probably a hydrocele. I could surgically remove it, but it's going to be quite painful. And, you don't have testicular cancer. And, I guess that's to pause for a second. Like that's one thing that, nobody wants to hear they have cancer. So when you have a doctor telling you you don't have testicular cancer, you're like, man, I made it. Like, I feel good. Something's wrong, but it's not cancer. And it's this thing's so rare. I didn't know to ask. I didn't think there's other cancers that could exist in the scrotal or testicular area. I just thought that was the definition.
So how were they so confident that it wasn't testicular cancer? Was it based on the ultrasounds?
It was based on the ultrasounds because the ultrasounds never showed anything odd with the testicles themselves. It kept showing a cyst on my left on the epididymis, but it didn't pick up anything else on this mass that was behind there. So he just, at that point in time, he said, come back in 6 months. And that was getting into late 2022, early 2023. And it had notably grown. It was gotten quite larger at that point in time. And I told my wife, we talked about it a lot. She's like, you got to get something done. And so my father had passed away. He got sick and was in the hospital and passed away in March. And that I fully planned to get this thing addressed. And it delayed it a little bit because we were dealing with family things and all that. And at that point, I decided to go back to my regular general practitioner who I'd seen and he and I really didn't talk about it. I said, hey, I've had this. I've been to the urologist. But at that point in time, in April, when I went back to my GP, he just looked at it invisibly. Like I could tell by his look and his reaction that he knew something wasn't right. He questioned me. He said, what are they telling you? And I told him, they said it was this or that. He said, it's not. And he said, I can't tell you that you have cancer, but I want you to go right after this appointment, get an ultrasound. I'll call and order you one right now. He said, something's not right. And we talked further and he said, I'll tell you just for my examination and the way that this looks, he said, I guarantee you that testicle is not even functioning properly anyway. So he said, whatever we find here, you should consider getting it removed. And I thought, okay, well, again, back to the other discussions I had with the urologist, it's like, we don't want surgery. Guys don't want surgery on their balls. It sounds painful. Guys don't want to lose a testicle. That's a stigma out there that I found is like, it's totally okay. So I had to get fast forward back to the story. I met with the urologist who just was like, I don't really know what this is, but if you want, I can schedule the orchiectomy. I said, absolutely. Let's get it scheduled, which we got in about 3 weeks later. And after the surgery, I remember waking up all groggy and everything and in pain. And he said, yeah, I had never seen anything like that. He said, I don't know what it is. He said it was a sizable mass that he said the surgery actually took me an extra hour and 15 minutes. I do these all the time, and this one was tough.
Wow.
So had that done, not even knowing that there was cancer, and he wasn't too certain, but he said, we'll have the pathology back in 3 to 5 days. And 3 to 5 days came and went, and then a week came and went, and another week. And so then I started calling saying, hey, what's going on here? Because that was building my concern and anxiety even more, just the waiting. I think that's true for everybody, but it's, when you expect 3 to 5 days and now it's going on 2.5 weeks. So I got that phone call from him. It was right around the end of June in 23. And he said, yeah, I've hardly even read about this in my 30 years of being a urologist. He said, I think I've seen it once, but a very, very small tumor. He said, your tumor was quite large and it's liposarcoma, paratesticular liposarcoma. And I said, that's cancer, right? He said, absolutely. So come in a day or two and meet with me and we'll figure this out from there.
So he was so confident that it wasn't cancer in the beginning, and then it later turned out to be a type of cancer. I mean, what did he eat crow, or I mean, how was that?
If my wife was on this podcast with us, uh, she would give her side of the story, which I mean, she was furious. She was absolutely furious because he came highly recommended. I've known other people, my father-in-law, his friends that have used them for just general urology over the years. So she got real fired up, and that was an interesting conversation that occurred between her and him. But yeah, he just kind of said, "Hey, I think you're going to be okay. We'll get your next steps. You know, you're going to have to meet with an oncologist. You might have to do chemo. You might have to do radiation." But right away, he did order me a CT scan of the pelvis and abdomen. He said, "I just want to make sure this didn't spread." So I was able to get in quickly for that to learn right away that, okay, there was no spread, at least that he could see or on this initial scan, which was very relieving.
That's good. Yeah, I'm pretty ignorant, and pardon my ignorance on what the actual paratesticular liposarcoma is, and obviously neither of us are doctors, but in your experience with it, like what is it? I was reading that it's in the tissue around the testicle.
It's in the tissue around the testicle. So it started, they believe, in the epididymis and then moved up to the spermatic cord. So because it started to move into my groin, like the bulge. And, you know, it's sarcoma, which is sarcomas are rare. This is one of the very rare sarcomas, but there's, I believe, over 80 subtypes of sarcomas. And this liposarcoma is like fatty tissue. But there's bone sarcomas, there's all types of sarcomas. And going down that rabbit hole, trying to learn about my diagnosis, reading about sarcoma, that was a whole nother, the anxiety spikes were insane until I was able to meet with specialists and figure out a path for treatment. So
those weeks that you were waiting for your pathology, how confident were you that it still was not cancer based on everything that you'd been told? And were you concerned at all about spread, or were you thinking it was just like this hydrocele thing that was being removed?
That's a great question. I wasn't too concerned based on the discussion that he had with my wife right after the surgery, what he told me right after the surgery. I only started to get concerned when the pathology was taking longer. But up until that point, I was like, "Hey, I'm great. You know, this is whatever it is out of me. I'm healing, feeling better, all that sort of thing."
All right. So you had your, post-surgical scans, and it showed no spread, but I know you ended up doing some radiation. So what was the impetus for the radiation?
So the next step from my visit with him was, "Hey, let's get you to an oncologist and we'll figure out your path." And again, he said, again, you might have to do chemo, you might have to do radiation just as a adjuvant therapy. Okay. We'll figure that out. And it's funny to thinking about the spread because at that time, and I just think this was purely stress related. But the little side story here is at that time, I started to feel this pain right in the middle of my back, and it got worse and worse. And one doctor that I had talked to said, "Yeah, sarcoma could spread to the lungs, and that's what we don't want." So I ended up having just a pinched nerve, but I had thought it was, "Hey, you feel something weird." I'm like, "Man, this is spread." So when I met with the oncologist for the first time, I told her, and she said, "I think you're fine," but she was great. She said, "Hey, let's get you a full PET scan just to make sure." And so that came back clean. The pathology report that talked about the tumor itself. So it said They called it a dedifferentiated grade 2 tumor, liposarcoma. It was almost 12 centimeters by 6 centimeters, so it was quite big. The good news on that, getting that report, was that the spermatic cord margins were clear, but there was potentially some positive margins around the area of the tumor that was closer to the scrotum, right? So if you think about it and the way the doctor explained it, he said there's only so much we can cut before we're cutting out your scrotum. So, okay, that made sense. But what does the positive margins mean? And he explained, well, it could just be the sample, but there could be some, might not have gotten it all. And so that gets to the point where I ended up meeting with the sarcoma specialist at UCSF here in San Francisco. And he reviewed everything. He felt the same. He said, I think you had a really good surgery. He said it's mildly concerning about the potential positive margins, but he said, I really think you have a good prognosis. But let's do, and I told him at the time, I said, listen, I'm healthy. I don't think I'm that old, 52 at the time. Like, whatever, you be as aggressive as you can be, right? Like, whatever you want to do, throw the whole kitchen sink at it. But he said, we're going to recommend radiation, I think I did 33 sessions. And he said, if you don't do radiation, 30% chance I give you that it comes back. If you do all this radiation, I give you a 5% chance. So I'll take 5% all day long. I could probably have a better chance of something happening driving it down to the grocery store,
Yeah. So let's talk about the radiation. Where was that done on your body? Was it on the actual scrotum itself?
Yeah, it was all on both sides of the scrotum. I did 33 sessions, so I went every day during the week. And that part of it was actually pretty easy. Driving to and from the appointment took longer than the appointment itself. So I'd go every day right around the same time and, get on the table and they prep me and, the machine goes around, does its thing. That was, I'd say, easy up until about the third week. So I don't know on some of your other, if you guys have talked about radiation on the scrotum with some of your other listeners or podcast people, but from day one, they give you a steroid cream and they give you a burn cream and they say, start applying this right now because at about week 3, you're just going to wake up and it's like you had a bad sunburn in one of your most sensitive areas, right?
Yeah.
And I was feeling great. I was doing that. I thought, oh, I got this. Not a problem. And then literally on the third week, I woke up and it was like scrotum's on fire, painful. And it just got worse from there because I had to keep getting the radiation. So it's kind of like going out in the sun and then you feel the sunburn a day or 2 days later. But this was just compiling on it. And it got pretty bad. Like I couldn't really walk. The doctor, he had warned me ahead of time. He said, hey, you might want to take time off work. You're not going to be moving much. I work from home primarily but I do travel a lot. So I wasn't traveling at the time. The only thing I couldn't do, I was supposed to go to Colorado with my wife to visit my kids for Parents Weekend and go to a CU football game and see the Buffs and all that. But I stayed back and I just was in bed. Felt fine otherwise, but the burning was off the charts.
Wow. And my knowledge on radiation is limited, but did you get a tattoo so they could like target it in, or how did that work?
Yes, they do little pencil dots. They do 2 on your hip, 1 on each side, 1 in the middle, just below your belly button, the lower abdomen. And, so that part of the process is you go in ahead of time and they basically do like a type of CT scan that maps all this out. And that gets programmed by a physicist into their machine and their computer that really that lays out the exact course of treatment you're getting, where the radiation is going to be focused more over other areas, and how it changes day to day. It's a pretty it's an incredible process. I mean, it really is. It's really high tech.
Yeah, smart people out there.
Yeah.
What was the concern, if any, with the other testicle?
So prior to the radiation, the doctor said, "Hey, if we're going to do this, we're radiating your whole scrotum." He said, you know, we talked about kids. I already had kids. I had vasectomy, so I didn't need to go like donate sperm or do anything like that for future, which I know a lot of the younger guys do. But he just said, "Hey, you know, you probably will have problems down the line with testosterone production. You could have ED as a side effect, and just something we're making you aware of." And I said, "Okay, well, they got stuff for that, right?" He said, "Yeah, you'll be fine, but this is just." So that was the effect on the other testicle. Was after I got through the radiation, and I'd say after the radiation, I healed up and was starting to feel better. For about 3 weeks after, I was just really tired all the time. By mid afternoon, I'd crash out and need to take a nap for an hour or so. But from there, I started working with a different doctor on, follow up. He was a specialist in this type of surgery, and he's a new doctor to me, but he'd seen this before, and we discussed testosterone and things like that. So he started doing, I'm going to test your T levels, which they came back low. That was in range. So I was about 320 on my testosterone level, which the bottom line, so that's still considered normal, but it's the low end of normal. And he even said, "Hey, for somebody your age, it's still on the low end of normal." I think below like 265 is considered, low. So he really didn't want to do anything there. He said, "Let's test you again in a couple months. Maybe you're just recovering from this," in which we did. We went back, and 2 months later, he did a full test on all the sex hormone tests. He did LH, FSH, free T, testosterone. And they were still the T levels were about the same. My LH and FSH were off the charts high. And again, I got frustrated because he really couldn't tell me why. He just said, "Well, it's just side effects of your radiation." And at that point, he said, "Well, you can go on testosterone." But he kind of downplayed it. He's like, "I wouldn't really, I think you're fine. You're going to have to do this for life, blah, blah, blah." And I walked away. I remember walking away from that appointment just feeling pretty low. So I did more research and I actually found the doctor who did my original vasectomy like 12 years ago, longer now. But he'd gone into his own private practice. He was a urologist, part of the health network. He went out on his own and started a men's health, men's sexual health practice, doing testosterone, all that stuff. And but he's guy doesn't take insurance. You gotta it's all out of pocket or through your health program. But I met with him, and he looked at all my tests, all my hormone levels, and really took the time to really tell me why it was like this and made sense of it. And we talked about testosterone replacement, and do I have to be on it for life? Not quite, and he explained the hows and whys of that. But that was a big help for me, was just that appointment, that consultation, and working with him.
So what did you end up doing? Did you end up taking testosterone?
Yes, I started it about May of last year, and it's been a big help. And I think the biggest thing that guys talk about with testosterone is libido and this and sex drive, which that helps, but it really helps as far as just overall, yeah, feeling a well-being, not feeling tired, not feeling foggy. I'm working with him on he monitors the levels very well so that you're not way off the chart, high or low. And that's been a big difference for me personally. So when I do talk with some of my friends, guys my age, we'll talk about that, and that's usually when my cancer comes up is, hey, I'm doing it because of this. And some of my friends still don't even know what I went through, right? I didn't really go overly public about it.
Gotcha. So which version of testosterone are you taking? Are you doing like self injections? Are you doing a gel, the
I do the
pellets?
bio T pellets. So
How
do you know about those?
is that what goes into your skin and it lasts for however long? And
Yeah, they just go in every 6 months. Usually insert it in the back of the glute, right in your butt, and they make a tiny incision, and then it over the next 6 months it kind of absorbs as it needs to, and it's been great.
so do you get like peaks and valleys with that, or is it pretty? Are you pretty even like with your mood and your energy level and everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been pretty even with it. They say as you get towards the end of the cycle, towards your fifth or sixth month, that you might feel a drop. I haven't felt that yet, but I've also made the effort to be really active and really watch what I'm doing health wise and intake on food and all that stuff. So making sure I get my sleep and all the things we should be doing anyway, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
As far as the paratesticular liposarcoma, what is the surveillance like? Now that you're a couple years out.
Yeah, so I have to go in for scans still every 6 months. I guess I've done three now. So they do MRI of the pelvis, MRI of the abdomen with and without contrast, and then they do a CT of my lungs and upper chest.
Okay. Do you get
So
scanxiety or anything, or are you pretty?
and it's funny. I heard you ask this on another podcast or two, and yes and no. So this last time, I'm due in April again, and the last time I went, I kind of got some scanxiety, and I don't know why. Because my attitude towards it is, okay, I got to do these. The further out that I get, the better. And I kind of think if there's any chance of them finding something, they're at least going to find it now, and we can deal with it, right? This last set of scans, normally my health network, they're really good about posting that on your chart in 24 hours. And the 24 hours went by, 2 days went by, 3 days went by. I sent a note in my chart. I called the doctor, and they're like, oh, yeah, she has the scans. She'll review them with you. And that I was just like, okay, something's bad.
Mm.
It's bad enough they didn't put it in my chart, and something's got to be wrong. And then finally, I was away with my wife that going into that weekend. So it was Friday afternoon. I got a hold of somebody at her office. I said, hey, just tell me, are they good? And they go, oh, yeah, yeah, they're fine. She hasn't reviewed them yet. Like, okay, that's great. But that gave me a little post scan anxiety. And, we'll just deal with the rest as they come. And we get further out, I think the better.
Yeah, well, I think that fear was justified given your first experience where you thought you were going to get your results in 3 to 5 days,
Oh, yeah.
and then weeks went by.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you mentioned in your submission here that you submitted, you had testicular cancer, not as it normally presents. I think though that's still important for the self exams because obviously something was doing the self exam you would have noticed it and you did, and unfortunately they kind of brushed you off. What advice do you have for somebody who might feel something down there and has found this podcast as a searching for they feel something?
I would say, definitely if you feel anything abnormal, get it checked out. Um, and I've been on some of the social media forums talking to guys back and forth about this. So when I see that they say they have epididymal cysts and they're worried about it, I usually respond, "Hey, you're probably really fine. These are common. But here's my case. And just to note, if you notice any changes in anything, get it looked at, use my story, tell your doctor, bring up paratesticular cancers, see what your doctor says, but be diligent. And if you notice any changes and you get that initial examination and diagnosis of, hey, you're fine. If you don't feel confident in that, go get another one, go to a different doctor, kind of eliminate what possibilities could be early on.
Yeah, great advice. For your kids, is there any risk? I mean, obviously not for your daughters, but for your son or even, both genders, with the sarcoma element, is there any concern with them?
No, that's a really good question too. There isn't. I talked to the sarcoma specialist about that. He said, this is just like, winning the lottery in reverse. Your odds are small. It had just happened to you. He said, it's nothing you did, nothing genetic, like per se, that's going to be passed down to your kids. So he said, don't worry about that at all, and I think that's fine. They're not worried, but I do talk to my son who's 20, he'll be 22. And I shared with him one of your podcasts where you had the Marine doctor on, and because he's in the Marines, he's going in the Marines after college, but I talk to him and say, hey, make sure you just do your monthly checks. And, if you notice anything at your age, because testicular cancer is more prevalent in the younger guys, so definitely sharing some input with him and just watching for his health.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about already?
Let me see. No, I don't think so. I mean, we covered a lot. Happy to share my story. It's an odd one, but I think bringing awareness to the fact that there could be other cancers in that area that could affect men. I think I would say, for any listener out there, somebody, don't be shy about talking about it. I think I kind of felt the shame of that too, like, oh, I'm losing a testicle, or I could be, or who am I going to talk to about this other than, we don't go to I'm not going to my friends and saying, I got something wrong with my testicles. Right. Cause then it's just a big, usually laugh and joke session. But I would just say, don't be shy about anything, go out and get the answers if you're not getting them, and just be your own advocate, push for appointments to be sped up. If they give you an appointment that's 2 months out, demand that you get in earlier. I did a lot of that, and I think that really helped.
Great advice. Is there anywhere anybody can reach out to you if they want to talk more about anything?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Patrick Hansen. There's probably hundreds of me out there, but Patrick Hansen, San Ramon, California. If you put that out, that'll narrow down the search. I'm on Instagram as Running Man, and the number 17. So Running Man 17. Instagram, I'm on there quite a bit, and sometimes I'm often on the Reddit page. So not really. I don't even know what my username is on there, but yeah.
Awesome, Pat. Thank you so much for being on It Takes Balls.
You got it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org.